Welcome to a deep dive into a pivotal yet often misunderstood chapter of American history, Prohibition. In 1920, the United States embarked on a grand social experiment, enacting the 18th Amendment. Its lofty goal was to eradicate alcohol production and sales nationwide, aiming for a more moral and sober society. The intentions were certainly noble, driven by decades of fervent activism from temperance movements, like the Anti-Saloon League and the Women's Christian Temperance Union, who argued that alcohol was the root of poverty, crime, and social decay. However, the reality that unfolded was starkly different from what its proponents envisioned. Instead of fostering a dry nation, Prohibition inadvertently created one of the most lucrative illegal markets in American history, transforming the very fabric of organized crime. It was a classic case of an attempted solution breeding a far greater problem. The moment the law took effect, a colossal void appeared. Legitimate distilleries, breweries, and saloons shut down overnight, but the insatiable public demand for alcohol did not simply vanish. This economic vacuum became an irresistible magnet for those willing to operate outside the law. They didn't see a ban, they saw an unparalleled business opportunity. This vacuum was quickly and ruthlessly filled by criminal organizations who saw a chance to amass immense wealth and power. Suddenly, a simple beverage became a highly valuable illicit commodity. The illegal production, smuggling, and distribution of alcohol, known as bootlegging, exploded into a massive underground industry. The American Mafia, a burgeoning criminal network at the time, was perfectly positioned to capitalize on this moment. Already possessing established illicit networks, a code of silence, and a willingness to use violence, they rapidly shifted their focus, seizing control of the entire black market liquor supply chain. From clandestine distilleries hidden in rural areas to elaborate smuggling routes along the coasts and borders, they built an empire. This wasn't just about selling booze, it was about mastering intricate logistics. Large-scale bootlegging involved rum running, where fleets of fast boats, known as contact boats, would meet larger vessels anchored in international waters off the Atlantic coast in an area known as Rum Row. They would load up with high-quality spirits from the Caribbean and Europe and race back to shore under the cover of darkness, evading Coast Guard patrols. Simultaneously, the northern border became a sieve for Canadian whiskey, smuggled across the Great Lakes and remote land crossings in vehicles modified with hidden compartments. To the south, tequila and other spirits flowed in from Mexico. For the domestic market, countless illegal stills produced moonshine, often in dangerous conditions. In the cities, criminal syndicates took control of industrial-grade alcohol, which was legally produced for manufacturing purposes. They employed chemists to recook it, removing the denaturing agents, and then mixed it with water and flavorings to create a dangerous concoction often called bathtub gin. The profits from this multi-pronged industry were astronomical, flowing directly into the coffers of criminal syndicates and funding their expansion. Cities like New York, Chicago, and Detroit became major battlegrounds for control over these illicit empires. Gangs fiercely competed for territory and distribution networks, leading to an unprecedented surge in violence. Street shootouts, assassinations, and bombings became chillingly common as rivals fought for dominance. One figure rose to notorious prominence during this era, becoming the very symbol of Prohibition's dark side: Al Capone in Chicago. Starting as a bouncer and enforcer, Capone quickly leveraged Prohibition's opportunities to build a vast criminal empire known as the Chicago Outfit. He wasn't just a gangster, he was a shrewd, ruthless, and highly organized businessman who understood supply and demand better than many legitimate executives. He controlled thousands of speakeasies, secret, illegal bars that operated behind closed doors in basements, back rooms, and disguised storefronts, quenching the nation's thirst. These establishments, which required a password for entry, became cultural hubs of the Roaring Twenties, but they funneled vast sums of money directly into Capone's hands. Capone's operations were a masterclass in criminal enterprise. He dominated the entire supply chain, from production in his own hidden breweries to distribution through a fleet of trucks, all protected by his army of ruthless enforcers. His wealth was staggering, estimated at over $100 million annually at its peak, an almost unimaginable sum at the time. This fortune allowed him to exert incredible influence. He famously bribed politicians, police officers, and judges effectively insulating his operations from law enforcement. Entire police precincts and courtrooms were on his payroll, creating a shield of immunity that made him seem untouchable. To maintain his monopoly, Capone unleashed brutal violence against his rivals. His war with the North Side Gang, led by Bugs Moran, culminated in one of the most infamous events in American crime history, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. On February 14, 1929, several of Capone's men, disguised as police officers, entered a garage used by the Moran gang. They lined up 7 of Moran's associates against a wall and executed them with machine guns. While the act was brutal, its purpose was strategic: to eliminate key rivals and send a terrifying message to anyone who dared challenge the outfit's control. The massacre shocked the nation and vividly demonstrated the shocking level of violence and impunity wielded by these new crime lords. Beyond Capone, other figures were instrumental in shaping the new criminal landscape. In New York, ambitious young mobsters like Charles Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky saw Prohibition not just as a way to get rich, but as an opportunity to organize crime on a national scale. They forged alliances between different Italian-American and Jewish-American gangs, creating a more cohesive and efficient network for bootlegging. They understood that cooperation and strategy were more profitable in the long run than endless bloody turf wars. This thinking laid the groundwork for the creation of the Commission, a national governing body for the Mafia that would coordinate activities and mediate disputes between crime families for decades to come. This era fundamentally changed how criminal enterprises operated in America. Prohibition forced these groups to become far more structured, hierarchical, and disciplined. Before the 1920s, many gangs were localized and loosely affiliated. However, managing complex supply chains, distribution networks, and protection rackets across multiple states required a sophisticated organization. This necessity inadvertently professionalized organized crime. The Mafia in particular adopted and refined a corporate-like structure. At the top was the boss, who made all major decisions. Below him was an underboss and a consigliere, or advisor. The organization was further divided into crews, each led by a captain, or capo, who managed a team of soldiers. Each member had a specific role and operated under a strict code of conduct, with loyalty enforced through intimidation and violence. This disciplined, hierarchical model was the blueprint for the modern American Mafia, making it far more resilient, efficient, and formidable. They developed intricate command structures, clear chains of command, and specialized roles within their organizations, allowing them to operate on a scale previously unimaginable. The widespread illegality of alcohol created a culture of defiance and a deep-seated cynicism toward the law and government. Millions of otherwise law-abiding citizens regularly broke the law by frequenting speakeasies or buying liquor from bootleggers. This mass civil disobedience blurred the lines between right and wrong and inadvertently lent a perverse legitimacy to the very criminals supplying the demand. Speakeasies also had an unintended effect on social norms, as they became places where men and women drank and socialized together in public, a significant departure from the male-dominated saloons of the pre-Prohibition era. By the time the government recognized the catastrophic failure of the noble experiment, the damage was already done. The immense social and economic costs, including the rise in crime, the loss of tax revenue, and the expense of enforcement, led to growing public pressure for repeal. In 1933, the 21st Amendment was ratified, finally ending national prohibition. Many expected organized crime to wither away once its primary source of income disappeared. But the opposite happened. The Mafia, far from dissolving, simply pivoted. During the 13 years of Prohibition, they had not only survived, they had thrived. They had accumulated vast capital, built a national infrastructure, and forged deep connections within political and law enforcement circles. Most importantly, they had honed their organizational skills and learned how to run large-scale illegal businesses. This newly empowered and structured criminal enterprise seamlessly redirected its resources into other illicit ventures. The immense profits from bootlegging were invested into new domains, diversifying their portfolios and solidifying their long-term presence. Illegal gambling became a major revenue stream, with mobsters establishing elaborate casinos and bookmaking operations. Loan sharking, or lending money at exorbitant interest rates, trapped desperate individuals in cycles of debt. Extortion, particularly through protection rackets, became another pillar of their income, targeting businesses who were coerced into paying for safety from threats, often posed by the mobsters themselves. Furthermore, labor racketeering saw significant growth as the mafia infiltrated legitimate unions to control entire industries, skim from pension funds, and extort businesses. The skills and networks honed during the Prohibition era, the experience in managing vast supply chains, the relationships with corrupt officials, and the ruthless use of violence proved invaluable and easily transferable to these new criminal fields. Prohibition, therefore, stands as a stark historical lesson and a critical, albeit unintentional, turning point in the history of organized crime in the United States. It was not merely an attempt to regulate morality, but a catalyst that profoundly reshaped the American underworld. What started as fragmented street gangs evolved into sophisticated, powerful, and nationally influential criminal syndicates. The 18th Amendment, intended to cleanse the nation, inadvertently provided the financial engine and organizational blueprint that empowered the mafia and cemented its place as a formidable force in American society for generations. The legacy of this noble experiment is not just about dry laws and secret speakeasies. It's a compelling cautionary tale of how well-intentioned legislation can have profound, unforeseen consequences that echo for decades.